Hey there, howdy. All right. Yeah, how's it going? Whoever decides to come in here and hang out with me for a little bit. As you can tell by the title of this stream, tonight's stream is going to be a little bit different. So I often mention how when okay, that was weird. So I often mention how I play, some games while, while listening to podcasts and stuff. And that is the case. That is the case a lot of nights. But I kind of figured I've actually had this thought for a little while of, I could go live and have it like playing in the background. So I don't have a great format for this. I literally just have it up here right above me, for what that's worth, just kind of, covering up my own advertisements. But, it's just one of those things where I just wanted to give this a shot, see what you guys think. If this is something that I can do to hang out and play video games and still do what I'm doing, but, be able to stream and chat about the stuff that they're talking about, it's just, I want to give this a shot. For what it is worth, here is the, I guess just for credit at least, that's the YouTube channel, or that's the YouTube link to the episode that I'm going to be watching, but I am going to have it right here. So, I mean, obviously it's just going to be two people talking, or a couple people talking back and forth. Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of figured, if you're bored, I'm going to be, it's like an hour long, the episode, and I have to be at work early in the morning, so I'm not going to be up terribly late. So I just kind of figured, why not do this? Plus, this is like one of the ways that I'm like still engaging with D&D is like still listening to the podcast. So, yeah, it looks like their topics is, I know you guys can't see that, but they're going to be talking about siege weapons in D&D, Hasbro layoffs, a WotC canceled video game, Ivan Van Norman leaving Darrington Press. I don't know who that is. Character combat parody and player input on adventures. So again, haven't watched this episode. I do watch these every week. But yeah, like I said, it's, it's a different format, if you're bored. So, all right. Well, and I'm also going to be playing, some Lost in Random, The Eternal Die. This is a game I've been playing for a couple days now, and I almost I got to the final boss today for the very first time, so we're getting there. We are slowly getting there. All right, I don't know what the audio levels are going to be like, so let's just get the show on the road.
Okay, let's just knock this out. This week on the Eldritch Lorecast,
This conspiracy goes all the way to the top.
Hasbro laying off.
So yes, let's talk about this cancelled game.
Put you against the microphone.
Ivan, get on the Lorecast right now!
Maybe we should just pivot to talking about bogs.
Welcome to the Eldritch Bugcast.
You hear it, folks? We're hankering.
We're hankering.
All that and more right now.
I keep up with Bob and Ginny D and not many others. I don't care much for Ginny D.
Hello,
I do listen to Bob every day.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 Lorecast for Batman puns in all the land. I'm Dale Kingsmill, and I'm here today with James Hake, no Sean Merwin, no Ben Byrne. It's just us running this house today. We've taken over the asylum.
Our house.
Whose house? our house. I don't know what the question is for this week. Do you know what the question is for this week?
I do know what the question for this week is, Dale, and it comes straight from Frank. Blessed be Frank's name. What are fun uses for a siege weapon? In D&D, of course. For a little further context, one of Frank's players loves the siege weapons from the new 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, but Frank's struggling to find a good scenario to use it in. Off the dome, if you were doing some fantasy fiction, some fantasy roleplay of your own, how would you fit a siege weapon into it?
This is so specific, and I have my mum to thank for it. But all I can think of is, because the idea of what can you use a siege weapon for other than a siege? What comes to mind is a scene from Northern Exposure where the entirety of the town of Sicily, Alaska comes out, and the local radio host has decided to build a trebuchet. And he's going to fling something with the trebuchet. And someone's house burnt down, and so they donate their burnt piano to the cause. But it's like this whole thing. He does a whole speech where he's like, hey, it's not what you fling, it's the flinging itself. And it just becomes like a town, like, moment where they just gather around. They're like, here's the community moment, let's fling this piano with the trebuchet. And they do. And they bond over it. And it's like nothing happens. That's just the end of the episode. But I think that's incredible.
Best use for a siege weapon? A nice summer fling.
A nice summer fling. Or a winter fling, or a spring fling.
Yeah.
Choose a season.
A spring fling.
A nice little spring fling. This is what the Americans are talking about when they talk about the spring fling. I was the spring fling queen. I got to fling the trebuchet. I feel like you could build a nice little, like, town festival around that. But maybe that, I just think that because I'm also someone who lives for a town festival in D&D.
No, I love that. That feels like a sort of medievalization of Megaton in Fallout 3, where they like worship the unexploded nuke that landed in the middle of their town.
Yes.
They worship the siege weapon. Yeah. Imagine
I'm
all
so
like
down.
the maypole flowers like coming down from the top of the trebuchet. No, this is really fun.
Yes, they have one of those siege towers.
Yeah.
Part of the, yes. We can do this. We can build a holiday around it.
Oh, yeah. I feel like my answer is a little bit more pedestrian than yours, Dale. We kind of went somewhere with yours. But what I would say is, if you're using siege weapons, you look in the DMG, right? And you see these siege weapons have these big damage numbers on them. I don't have the DMG page open offhand. It's, it's like 4d10, 5d10, 6d10 damage. And it's regardless, it's totally disconnected from your character's stats, right? They have a flat bonus to hit and a big old chunk of damage attached to it. To me, the way you use that is you use it in a big battle, a mass combat against a giant monster. I'll put you in chat right there, following me up on that. Kaiju battle. Yes. I think the very beginning of Tyranny of Dragons, right? Where a big blue dragon attacks the town of Greenest when you're just like level 1 chumps. That's the perfect option to all of a sudden have your characters get behind the wheel of a trebuchet. You can have this whole tense scene of one of your characters being the spotter, like adjust 30 degrees north, like you're doing submarine warfare or something, and then you fling a burning pile of pitch at a dragon that's like a mile up in the sky. I think that's perfect, because there's no way the characters are going to be able to use bows and arrows against that. Bows and arrows against the lightning.
Yeah, come on now. I love that. That also sounds a little bit like, I feel the legacy of the ship warfare from the Ethereal Expanse. How do we run this ship? I feel the legacy of that in there. Let's all work together. Let's all man our stations.
Yeah, you figured me out. I love it when a team works together. Speaking of a team not working together, we've got news, a little less fun than a trebuchet, about Hasbro laying off 3% of their staff, their workforce across all departments. And that equates to about 150 jobs. I know we say every week we're not going to talk about tariffs, and here we are. The reason for the layoffs has been blamed on said tariffs, which Wizards of the Coast flagged as a potential issue for their profitability back in April. But we've got some other culprits at large as well. And it's the fact that Hasbro as a company is predominantly a toy company. As we've seen, this is not a new problem, but toy sales continue to slump year over year over year as people are more interested in digital toys, video games, and that sort of thing.
With the exception, of course, of Labubu's.
How did we get here with Labubu's, Dale? I learned about him about a month ago, and now I'm seeing him everywhere.
It's been bizarre watching from the outside as the Labubu craze really takes off. I think it speaks to the way that there is a toy spirit still within many of us. But how do we access that? Especially how do we exploit that as capitalists? You know?
For those not in the know, Labubus are these fuzzy, they look to me like a cross between a Furby and a troll doll, where they're
it's
this.
a little
they look
guy
demonic.
who kind of looks like Max from Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah, they've got a sort of hard plastic face and hands and this fuzzy body, and they're these little
They're awful
creatures that you
looking.
clip onto your bag or your belt loop, as I've seen some people do also.
Because we're returning to the old belt loop decoration aesthetic.
Y2K is back, baby!
It's back, baby.
Though, curiously enough, returning from Labubus,
Sorry.
is that even though Hasbro's toy sales are way down, Wizards of the Coast digital gaming is way up 46% in the same period in which Hasbro laid off 3% of their staff. And they've got, quote, ongoing momentum in digital and licensed gaming and D&D. We can put a lot of that squarely at the feet of Baldur's Gate 3, I think, even more than a year out from the game's release. But we've got some news, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, Dale, to talking about some canceled D&D games, despite this
See,
huge
because what you
launch.
did just then,
Yeah.
that's an actual segue.
You
That's
can't
an
let
actual
Ben hear
segue,
about
though.
this.
So what we're experiencing right now here together is what an actual segue looks like. So yes, let's talk about this cancelled game, which this was the first time I was hearing about this.
It's called Project Dante, unrelated to our intrepid producer. It's something that I heard about quite some time ago when I was speaking with Wizards folks, and my NDA prevented me from saying a word about it. It was being developed by Hidden Path, a renowned developer known for games such as
Other ones.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive,
Oh,
Age
what?
of Empires
Wait,
2. Hidden Path worked with Valve developing Counter-Strike Global Offensive.
I didn't expect you to come in with the 1-2 punch of two actually huge famous games.
They
Like,
contributed model work to Left 4 Dead 2.
whoa.
Whoa,
Yeah,
what?
And notably, this AAA third-person open-world D&D game announced in March 21 had a pretty well-known figure in the tabletop game space, Bluebeard's Bride developer Whitney Strix Beltran, partner of Ajit George, who worked on Tales from the Radiant Citadel and Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, among many other enormous TTRPG industry projects. Yeah, so this game was a huge deal, an open-world AAA third-person game that we just saw. If you go look it up, there is demo footage out in the news articles talking about it, and it
looks pretty good.
It looks pretty good.
Apart from some pretty hectic motion blur, which I think a few of us in the Lorecast Discord chat did note, but the game itself looks very advanced for what I was expecting.
Me too.
If that makes
it
sense.
looks like, I don't know, reminds me of Elden Ring a little bit.
Yeah, it maybe didn't have the oomph of combat, but
Yes.
but the combat was working.
And it makes me wonder what could have possibly caused that game to be canceled. If digital game sales are up, if games seem to be quite profitable for Wizards of the Coast right now, what could have caused a
Probably
huge game
digital rights
from a huge developer
ownership.
and partnership to have the rug pulled out from under it?
I recognize from what we see in that article, it does look like it's, filling a similar section of the Venn diagram to Baldur's Gate 3 in a lot of ways. To me, that doesn't seem like a downside, if that makes sense. Even if it is filling a really similar niche, people who finished Baldur's Gate 3 probably have a hankering for, I just want to play more, but like, what about different NPCs, different companions? And there they were. You've got concept art for a stack of different companions, some of them of different classes to the companion classes that we see in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm so curious about what could have been. It's really interesting looking at the concept art as well. It really fills me with sort of a nostalgic Magic the Gathering feeling, where it's like, yes, the simple, straightforward magic of Magic the Gathering.
We might have to do a little bit of timeline archaeology on this one, right? Because the game was announced in 2021, which feels like a lifetime ago now. Baldur's Gate 3 at the time is still in very early access. February 2024 is when the CEO of Hidden Path announced that the company would be laying off 44 employees after it was unable to secure funding for an unannounced RPG project. And that's quoted from a Kotaku article around that time. And so I think we found a chicken egg scenario here where the game may not have been canceled because the game itself was in trouble. There may have been a little bit of comorbidity there, but probably the bigger issue is that the studio developing it was in trouble and laid off a huge portion of its staff and could no longer support development of multiple huge projects.
Tried some of that Lost.
But if you don't mind, I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself here also.
Do it, but do it in a different.
I will say the nice thing about Lost in Random, actually both of these games, the original and the Eternal Die, is that they're both on Game Pass, and I didn't have to drop $20-some on this. I am happy that I was able to support the developers. That's always a thing. I didn't realize both of them were on Game Pass. So, luckily, though, that does mean that I don't have to buy a copy for Kaylee to play. And she can play right on the Xbox in the living room, which means I don't have to worry about her hogging up my PC to play it. So, plus she can also play it on her Odin Portal 2, which she kind of is more into playing on that. So, yeah. Woo, Lost in Random.
Different voice. Do it in a
I'll do it in this voice, like this. God, no, I wouldn't do that to you people. Here's another way to look at it. Wizards of the Coast has a rocky relationship with its side projects, its third-party outsourced projects, right? Its branded IP projects. Typically, when they get cold feet, they've been known to pull the plug. By the time that the plug was pulled, as far as we know, on this one, on the latest D&D game to have come out was Dark Alliance, which I think everyone will agree is a bad game. It was not received well.
Which one is Dark Alliance?
Dark Alliance is the one that had a trailer that looked like it was filmed on a GoPro, Dritz with a GoPro on his swords.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
I don't, and it sounds interesting.
It's a follow-up to Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance from the 90s, and it was a sort of a 4-player Diablo-esque looter dungeon basher sort of game set in Icewind Dale. And it was, I never played it. The trailer did not inspire me to play it.
It was
trash. Like it was one of those Diablo-style kind of live service loot box.
No, that was the problem, is that
money pit extravaganzas.
The biggest problem with Dark Alliance is that it wasn't like a Diablo-style, looter action adventure game. The biggest problem with it was the fact that the whole concept of the game was it was an action adventure beat 'em up that had a loot mechanic that was more like Souls. It was extremely difficult, and getting past like the first stage was a pain in the ass. And it really heavily relied on you having other people playing.
That people had been souring on for a long time. And by that point, Baldur's Gate 3 had not come out yet, right? D&D had not had a mega hit on their hands in the video game department, and I have a hunch that D&D brass were getting cold feet about games. And so they were like, this AAA project is costing us way too much money. We don't have any indication that our games are succeeding. Heroes of Waterdeep flopped. Dark Alliance flopped. Nothing. The enhanced editions of Planescape Torment or whatever, they're not moving the needle. So I say, pull back. We're going to focus on selling, Funko Pops with D&D branding on them instead.
Well, I mean, Funko Pops. I mean, it feels, I don't know. I keep thinking about this Labubu effect, right? Because it's just, I recognize that play has changed, but there's something that is slightly off about it. Because kids are still excited to receive toys. Kids still want toys of their favorite thing. People at large still get caught up in like what is the new craze, the Labubu craze, the Beanie Baby craze, you know what I mean? Like that there's those echoes of behavior are still there. I just wonder how much of this shift away from toys is just it's not a symptom of people not wanting toys anymore. How much of it is a symptom of just people don't have the spare cash to be spending on toys all the time, and so now it's just a thing that happens at Christmas and on birthdays. Maybe it's just a reflection of broader income rather than but I'm not an economist.
Jeez.
I'm not a Labubu economist. I don't know what any of it is. I'm just watching from the outside and being confused.
I want to add one final wrinkle to this story, Dale, and get your opinion on it. There is another recently canceled AAA Wizards of the Coast backed IP game that got canceled about 4 months ago. It's from a studio called Skeleton Key, which we've talked about a little bit on this podcast a while ago. Mostly in terms of they're developing an unknown D&D branded game. Or was it D&D branded? Certainly a Wizards of the Coast project. Anyway, several weeks after the rumored addition of Dragon Age the Veilguard's game director to the Skeleton Key team, that would be Nassim Aitkasi, Wizards of the Coast, it's a second-party development team called Skeleton Key. Their upcoming game was shut down. It was supposed to be a game with immersive gameplay, unique stories, and thought-provoking moments of suspense and horror. The leader of the studio, Christian Daly, who previously worked at BioWare as the executive producer for the Dragon Age franchise and had held leadership positions at companies like EA and Blizzard. You know, big names, great pedigree going on here. All of a sudden, quietly shut down just 4 months ago. We don't have an excuse like Dark Alliance was their last game to resolve this one anymore, because Baldur's Gate 3 Mania was in full effect even as late as 4 months ago.
This conspiracy goes all the way to the top.
Goes all the way to the top. I don't really understand why this could be happening. I think that people yearn for D&D games. I don't think Baldur's Gate is some flash in the pan mistake. You know, I think Larian is an exceptional studio. They made an exceptional game. But D&D, I think, it is a really strong framework to build fantasy gaming on. So why does it keep flopping when it comes to video games? It's flopping before it even hits market.
I mean, Sword Compass in chat brings up the recent news when Wizards announced their sort of video game stuff, and it used the word exclusive, and whether that could be part of why they're sort of slowly shutting down these sort of third-party projects. And I really don't know. I mean, it's possible, but it's also, I mean, games are just really expensive to make.
Yes. Games are extremely expensive to make. And we often talk about how...
You want to know why I think D&D video games don't do well in general? Baldur's Gate obviously being the exception, why a lot of games don't make it to they don't make it out of production, they get scrapped, or it's like Dark Alliance where it hits, it comes out hot, and then nobody buys it, nobody keeps playing it. The reason is because D&D as a game is very hard to replicate in a meaningful way on a digital platform that isn't like Baldur's Gate. Okay, Baldur's Gate had they got the lightning in the bottle, if you will. Okay, D&D is all about freedom. It's all about choice. Okay, when you play a video game, you might want to go wandering 100 miles in a direction, and you might get so far you're gonna hit a barrier, okay? Or you might go up to an NPC and you want to tell that NPC, the NPC's like, my cat's stuck in a tree, can you help me? And you might want to look at them and tell them like, no, go fuck your cat. Like, that's not a thing you can do in a video game. Because in a video game, you have to script everything. and you have to have dialogue trees, you know, and dialogue trees, as branching as they can be, often have to come back to, you know, it's almost egg shaped, if you will. You're gonna go from the initial starting conversation point, and you can say all these different things and they're gonna react, but you're kind of having to come back to like maybe 3 or 4 maybe ending points of that conversation. So, and it could be like, you know, good, bad, neutral, you know, however you want to do it, but everything in a video game has to be scripted. And the problem with scripting is that you take the choice away from the players. You know, you can't tell an NPC to fuck off. You can't tell an NPC, you know, that you don't care. Like, sure, you can walk away, but it has no, you know, if you end the dialogue in a conversation, generally it has no consequence. Or you have to pick an option. It also, because a video game has to be scripted, it is requiring you to pick a path that video game has predetermined. You know, no matter how many ways you might want to play it, even Baldur's Gate is great as it is, you're gonna start that game on the Nautilus. You're gonna meet, you know, Shadowheart and Lizelle and, you know, well, I guess you wouldn't meet Karlach there, but you're gonna meet, you know, you're gonna meet Shadowheart on the beach once you get off the ship. You're gonna meet Shadowheart on the beach, and then, you know, you're probably gonna run into Astarion, because the game sort of takes you that direction, because you're either gonna run into Astarion, or you're gonna run into Gale, or you're gonna run into Lizelle at some point. So, and no matter what, really, the game's gonna take you up to that battle between the Druid's Grove and the Goblins, and like, there is a story that has to take place. What's up, Adam? Good morning. So the problem with the problem with trying to make a D&D-esque video game, any fantasy RPG or action adventure game could be a D&D game. I mean, how many D&D supplements are made based off of video games? I mean, look at fucking Monster Hunter. I've seen dozens of, you know, supplements out there of like, oh, here's how you can, you know, here's tools to like harvest creatures and like, you know, cut them open, and how to use their body parts for armor and weapons and tools and all this jazz. You know, there's so many different games out there that you could say, oh, this would make, oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, my ad blocker has been updated. You know, so basically we need NPCs ran by. So that is an actual thing. That is a thing that is possible and can happen. We have AI now, so you can actually develop an AI bot to, in real time, respond to how you're doing. But even to that degree, there still needs to be scripting. You know, having an NPC operate on AI for dialogue is one thing. You can download a mod for Skyrim that does exactly that, where you can it registers your microphone and you can speak to them and they just spit back, you know, stuff. But even them, they're pre-programmed to at least have like a certain personality, and a DM can do that. But even in that example of Skyrim being modded, Skyrim still has a structure. There is still a story structure. So you unfortunately can't have a D&D game that is ever going to feel like real D&D, because it's just not possible. You know, just the amount of freedom that is afforded in actual play, you just can't get that in a video game. Now, if you want to make a D&D themed action adventure game, that is totally fair. That is totally possible. Like they were saying, take Elden Ring, for example. Okay, cool. Have a big open world that has a bunch of dungeons and a bunch of quests and towns and villages that you can go and explore. I mean, Breath of the Wild was a huge world, and there's all kinds of stuff to find in it, and make the lore in there match the D&D world, you know, like build a map that has a all right, Adam, enjoy your day. You know, build a map of, like, you know, the Neverwinter Wood area with Neverwinter and Phandalin and Lylon and, you know, Long Saddle and the Sword Mountains. Like, you could do that. And you know, you could populate locations, put in random dungeons, and put in scripted locations, and then allow your players to make a character of their own and then have them go out and do stuff. There's still obviously going to be scripting. There's obviously going to be, like, you know, very specific things that are going to happen. But let's be real. In that in that particular example, why can't I find it? Oh, I know why, because it's not a real book. You know, even in that respect, you could have something like Dragon of Icespire Peak, or you could even have something, you know, like Phandalin and Below, or Phandelver and Below, where your adventurers are going to have a certain structured campaign that they're going on to adventure. And that's kind of the way that Baldur's Gate is. I mean, Baldur's Gate could totally be a campaign that players play through, but make it something, you'd have to make it something that is more structured, that does have bounds. And that makes it not a D&D game, but you could have it D&D themed. At that point, it's an action adventure game. What you have to then obviously question, which is what a lot of game developers and, you know, executives and publishers obviously do have these conversations with, do people want something like that? You know, I would like something like that. Fuck, I would love if any one campaign from 5th edition was turned into, like, if there was like a generic RPG, I know GURPS, but if there was like a generic universal RPG game out there, you know, I know RPG Maker is a thing, but like if there was a way to take like Elden Ring and like have an open map that you can edit and change and program the way you want it, and then have whatever characters you want, like, sure, that'd be fun to play through. If you're making it like a beat 'em up, you know, an action adventure, again, an Elden Ring's sort of play style, because that's what we don't have. That's what nothing we've had before, because in a lot of cases, the intricacies of D&D play comes with that turn-based stuff. That's why games like Baldur's Gate worked well, because it structured itself like D&D. It's really hard to, you know, represent bonus actions and stuff like that in, you know, real-time play. But you know, it's something where if you just had a really well-crafted action-adventure game with, you know, D&D thematic lore, I'd play the shit out of that.
Wizards is a many-headed hydra. You can talk to a lot of different people inside of it and get a lot of different opinions. And if there's any sort of, you know, organizational chaos going on behind the scenes, I remember working at D&D Beyond and this deal being struck with Riot Entertainment to do this sort of digital promotion that cross-branded D&D Beyond.
Small indie company, Riot.
Legends of Runeterra. Yeah, exactly. And it passed through so many stages of approvals and approvals and approvals, and then it went out. And then day one, someone from Wizards called D&D Beyond and said, "Shut it all down. We don't actually want it."
It's just fascinating. And Michael in chat brings up a really good point. Why do they get canceled so late in the development process? Because then you're spending all the money and you're not making any of it back.
Yeah, it's baffling. If I had an MBA, I might be able to more insightfully answer this.
If I had my doctorate in Labubu economics, then I could answer some of these questions, but I don't. If Sean was here, Sean would know.
Oh, Sean, how we miss ye. When it comes to missing people and people departing companies, there will probably be no absence felt as keenly as Ivan Van Norman departing from his company director role at Darrington Press. Ivan Van Norman, he and I went to the same college. Mackenzie DeArmas went to, and Spencer Stark went to. All by pure happenstance. None of us knew each other in school.
Not happenstance anymore. Now that college is going to get a reputation for churning out RPG professionals.
I know. Yeah, Chapman University, if you're listening, come get me to speak. For those who don't know, Ivan Van Norman was a company director at Darrington Press from its founding. He was a former Geek and Sundry member. He is also the head of a smaller RPG studio called Hunters Entertainment, which is responsible for hits like Alice is Missing, the text-only RPG, and Kids on Bikes, a rather Stranger Things-y kids in the 80s Spielbergian RPG. And just as before, a lot of questions swirl around the nature of his departure from the company. His statement on the matter was very diplomatic. I can't read positive or negative feelings into it one way or another. You can find it. It's on
I can't
World.
read, so.
Yeah, Dale has a rare condition that only makes her able to read legal documents.
That's it.
Yeah. Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, as we talked about, have been hired at Darrington. Chris is the creative director and Crawford as the game director. Dale, do you think that Ivan's role has been divvied up and shared among these two titans?
It's a good question, but I mean, I don't have a great comprehensive understanding of what Ivan's role at Darrington was. I have a better understanding of what his role was at Geek and Sundry, and of course through the sort of Twitch era and his sort of connection on camera with the Critical Role folks.
Yeah.
And of course his role on hit reality TV series King of the Nerds.
King of the Nerds!
Let's not forget. Always remember. I don't know. It's really tricky. I don't read any positive or negative. I find it difficult to sort of figure out. His role at Hunters Entertainment certainly does seem to be similar to the roles that we're sort of hearing that Perkins and Crawford are going to have at Darrington. So it is absolutely within the realms of possibility, but it's also within the realms of possibility that Ivan wanted to go and focus on his company stuff. And so it just was a natural fit. It's impossible to say.
We can only speculate. Listen, if I'd really wanted to, I've got Ivan's number in my phone. I could have texted him and said, Ivan, we want for the
Ivan,
record.
Get on the Lorecast right now.
Ivan, I'm gonna put you against the microphone right now. Van Norman, I want you to speak on the record. No. That's where the sort of dividing line between my role as a journalist and a podcaster kind of meets the edge of my role as a friend and a colleague. I don't really want to ask questions like that.
We should at a separate time invite him on the Lorecast. Just separately.
That's a great idea. Dude, if we'd had our druthers, we could have had Ivan on this week's Lorecast.
If we'd had more than half an hour's notice.
Yeah.
That it was going to be just the two of us.
All right,
Poor Ben woke up sick. Get well soon.
Though the energy of the Lorecast when it's just the two of us, I feel is a very special brand of chaos we don't get with the
two
shall we call it grounding influence?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, but Dale, I tend to agree. I tend to agree that that Chris and Jeremy, yeah, they're being brought in for their leadership roles for sure. But Ivan, in my experiences working with Darrington, has always felt like sort of a executive producer. It's kind of like his is one of the desks that things need to pass on. He needs to sign off on contracts and kind of approve the big picture of sort of logistical scope for the company. And he, which is not to say he had no creative influence. I'm certain he had a lot, because again, he is a creative guy. But I have a hunch that his role will not be replaced by any one or even two people. I have a hunch that Travis Willingham is probably going to take a lot of his role. He is the CEO over at Critical Role. And as much as Critical Role and Darrington Press want to differentiate themselves as entities, they are in a way inextricably linked.
It's one of those things as well where when you're a small company that's sort of finding your feet, often you have people working in that place who are really handling the job of multiple people.
Yes.
It is that they are taking on the work of a lot of different people, and someone like Ivan, who is very capable in a lot of areas, takes a lot of that that kind of burden onto themselves. And this is the ideal situation in a lot of ways of when a company is growing. They should be able to hire more people and share that load. And frankly, I mean, I'm really excited to see what kind of stuff we're going to get out of Hunters Entertainment with it having, more of Ivan's attention, because I love Kids on Bikes. I love Alice is Missing. I'm really excited to see the kind of stuff that they can foster and put out into the world.
Totally agreed. When it comes to Hunters Entertainment, it's a company that is owned by Ivan. He's the head
don't get another attack.
But knowing Darrington Press, he probably didn't have a lick of time for it, right? Maintenance at best. No big new concept development pushes, and this is speculation, obviously, but knowing how busy all the people at Darrington are, it seems very likely to me. And the thing that strikes me most about that...
Chris De La Rosa.
Yes.
Couldn't remember Chris's last name. Had to look up Chris's last name.
Chris De La Rosa also lent his talents to Darrington Press on a number of things, like Tal'Dorei Reborn. He was a layout artist for that. That's how I know the guy. And I think it's worth noting here that Darrington Press, for all of its prominence in the industry because of its connection to Critical Role, is still a very young company. 4 years is not very old at all for a game studio. We compare it to things like Monty Cook Games, Paizo. All of those companies have a decade plus, often 2 decade plus history to them. And I think people expect a certain level of stability out of Darrington.
It's not my first time in the snow
maybe they
region.
haven't quite earned yet. Because Darrington has been very ambitious, right? They want to punch at the weight class of a Paizo or a Monty Cook Games, and with the the wild success of Daggerheart, it seems like they are. But I have to imagine it leads to some real chaos behind the scenes as everyone is wearing 3 different hats. Speaking of balance within parties, we've got a question from the listener mailbox today. And Dale, where could you email if you wanted to get a question on this Eldritch Lorecast?
Well, James, if you wanted to get an email on this Eldritch Lorecast, well, not this episode.
You have to email us 2 weeks ago.
It's too late. It's too late. But a different this podcast, the Eldritch Lorecast, you can email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Podcast@ghostfiregaming.com or on our YouTube comment section, or even in the comments of your local podcasting app.
Yeah, there are comments on Spotify. Did you know that? Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I never use Spotify, actually.
Neither do I. We're really...
You heard it here first, kids. Esmeralda's question is about parity between characters in combat. And here's the gist of it. In D&D 5e, every class is sort of designed to contribute in an equal, if asymmetrical way in combat. With a couple of exceptions, the game never assigns a character class to be the master of a certain pillar. We can see some characters leaning in one direction. A barbarian or a fighter may lean towards combat. A bard may lean towards social. A ranger may lean towards exploration. But they're very subtle, especially if we compare to games like the Witcher RPG, in which some classes are just dead useless outside of their core pillar. And so the question Esmeralda brings to the table is, why is this? Anyway, and
yes, I beat
are
the frog.
games that defy this sort of broad, equal paradigm better than ones that want everyone to be roughly equivalent, roughly capable of contributing in every arena?
Right. I mean, it is an interesting question, particularly with regards to balance, as we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. But first of all, I completely agree that 5e attempts
So I can
to kind
replace
of bring
this
an
at some
equal weight to
point.
each class in combat. I'm not sure that it succeeds particularly. I mean, the obvious example is if you look at the 2014 classes. I think the thing that everyone says all the time, not everyone agrees now because it's cool to be contrarian. I say as a contrarian, but the Ranger stands out as being not particularly balanced when it comes to combat with some of the other classes. It's not as strong. A lot of its abilities tie into wilderness, and then there's that question of, right, but you don't get to play those wilderness abilities, you just kind of skip past them. That's the strength of the Ranger. So it becomes an interesting class in terms of its cool strengths are that you don't have to play a certain thing, as you skip ahead to the stuff that you're not good at, which is interesting. But when you start to look at, the rogue and the bard as skill monkeys or social strength characters, I think what it really boils down to ultimately is the sort of system that D&D or 5th edition employs with regards to ability scores and how they benefit you. You start to reach the point once you dig in deep, you start to realize that some ability scores are more useful than others. Not all ability scores were created equal is kind of an ongoing problem for designers in 5e, is that dexterity is a really useful, powerful ability score, and something
dexterity
like strength
is the number one skill.
Really not. Constitution is really not, because they add to your passive abilities rather than your active abilities. And so it's that same sort of thing that I was just talking about, where the strength of those things is that you don't see them in use because you are skipping ahead to the play, and the play is stuff that your character isn't as good at. So if you are playing a barbarian who's got really high strength and really high constitution, you're only getting, what is that, two skills that are sort of directly impacted by your thing, your athletics, and maybe it's just your athletics.
It might legit just be athletics.
It might be, because in my head I was thinking climb. Is climb a skill in 5e? I don't think it is, right? It's in athletics. It's just kind of attached to athletics. But yeah, so you've got this interesting thing where your constitution impacts your health score, but that means that it becomes a passive thing that you aren't using, and your strength gets added to your attacks, but it's not really getting used outside of combat. So it's that those strengths or those, I need to find a different word because we're talking about strength as an ability score as well. Those benefits to your character get kind of skipped over when you're looking for what's the next play step. Which kind of is where that starts to really show.
Fuck yeah.
Where it becomes interesting is stuff like intelligence, where you do have a lot of different skills that use something like intelligence, but that is a difficult thing to express through gameplay because it's just one roll. I mean, a lot of these things, your social skills, are a one roll and then it's done situation with the way that a D20 fantasy typically works, and that results in, again, less playtime versus combat, where you are making many rolls that have micro impacts over a long period of time.
My first thought is, you're right, strength only has one skill proficiency attached to it. I knew for a fact that Constitution was unique and it had no proficiencies attached to it at all, but deep in the back of my head, I too was convinced that strength had some other ability score attached, or some other skill proficiency. No, it's not.
There you go.
And honestly, not even a lot of tool proficiencies use
Wisdom
it.
has the highest.
Even with the ones that seem strengthy, like blacksmith's tools or something, I think people would really say that's more of an intelligence check to craft something. And it's like, it does, I suppose strength is the attack skill check, as Bagsy says in chat, but
this one actually
attacks are different to skill checks.
I still rather disagree, even in the sort of lighthearted way we're saying it here. Dexterity remains keyed to attacks. Spellcasting ability remains keyed to spell attacks and saving throws. This is exactly why, for basically all of all of 5e, people have been talking about how dexterity is the god skill. It affects attacks and armor class and a lot of skill proficiencies and a lot of tool proficiencies, namely the most important one, thieves' tools.
Yeah, lockpicking.
And even though athletics is the most broadly applicable skill, as Delport Brecklin says in chat, it really does seem like, just from the number of characters or players I've had at my table say, can I use an acrobatics check instead of this athletics check? Even when strength gets its one time to shine, people are going to be looking for ways to kind of edge their dexterity skill into the spotlight anyhow.
I'll take that.
Plus, that broadening of the skill just contributes even more to what I was saying.
I will take that. Give me another one.
One roll to solve it all.
Come on.
Yeah.
We've wound up talking about ability scores and skill checks and stuff like that.
I'll take all that.
And how they relate to classes, right? I love the idea of strength and constitution contributing more to these scenes, right? Constitution, it doesn't have any skills attached to it, but it theoretically at least has things like exhaustion and forced march and like concentration. Yeah, concentration is very important, even for non-martial characters, even for spellcasters. And I feel like D&D's sort of heroic aspirations kind of get in its own way here, because things like your own physical endurance, your strength and your constitution, your ability to persevere despite wretched conditions, right? Despite slogging through mud and rain, things that we see in like Fellowship of the Ring, right? Trudging through swamps. Aragorn is dutifully continuing his path, even though the terrain is miserable. It's sort of a downer. And especially in the new player's handbook, where all of the art, almost all of the art, is very superheroic, right? I mean, we look at the back of the book and we see stuff like, this is the tone we're trying to set. It's people flying away on the back of a dragon. One of the characters is literally flying with magic and stuff like that. It is all incredibly high powered. There's no time for a miserable slog through a disgusting marsh and something like that. There's no need to test your strength, your mettle in terms of physical endurance. We'd rather be doing, acrobatic backflips and stuff like that.
Hold on, sorry, gotta pause that. I don't know what the fuck this is. I've never seen this room before. I will say I've only ever made it to, the third biome like twice, maybe 3 times now. I'm just destroying all this ice because I don't know what's about to happen. Corrupted? Ooh, all damage increased by 50%, but so is all damage taken. Defeating the Formageddon grants a revive, but drains 25. Holy shit, I don't want that. Increase evade by... No. Oh, God, I don't want any of this. I don't want to increase the damage taken. Although, 50% extra damage is pretty good. And don't I have reduced damage from weakened foes? I do. You know what? Fuck it. We're doing it. Ah, really? I don't get an achievement for my first corrupted thing?
Bad.
Yeah.
Oh, as well.
I mean, you can ask me about the bug. Me about bugs.
Maybe we should just pivot to talking about bugs. I think that's clearly what we really want to talk about here.
Welcome to the Eldritch Bugcast.
Yeah. Well, God, you're on a bug train of thought now.
I'm so sorry, I put you on a bug train of thought.
When's the last time we saw a bog in 5e? There's Salt Marsh from the eponymous book.
Yeah.
There's the Mirror of Dead Men from Tyranny of Dragons. That's the first adventure they came out with.
Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
Ah, there it is. Okay.
There it is. But it's a pretty good. I was gonna say bog. It's not really a bog, I don't think. Maybe it is, but I think it's a swamp.
If only I really knew Wild Beyond the Witchlight like the back of my hand, then I could opine about if that bog was a miserable bog,
I actually want this
or
instead.
a fantastical fairy bog where
Yes.
more magic reigns.
Beautiful.
No, but I'm
I need to
thinking
get some
about
dye.
this element of Esmeralda's question where
Oh,
it's
the Formageddon.
does this happen in lighter games? Can lighter games achieve this? Should be striving for this equality in non-combat areas.
fucking
I think a lot of lighter RPGs have kind of the opposite
I'm so
problem.
fucked.
Well, maybe not the
That
opposite
glass
problem, but
cannon's
where
gonna
there's
bite
so
me in
much
the
focus
ass.
given to non-combat. Eloy, we talked about kids on bikes earlier. So much
Yeah.
attention is given to non-combat, and the
Ow!
expectation is that you won't engage in combat. I think about the gumshoe system. It's so the mind for equality between characters is put towards those sort of social elements or investigation elements or things like that, that when it comes to combat, it's really
Fucking hell.
threadbare and you're just kind of left going. I think there is kind of an expectation that you say, oh, well, it's not a combat game, don't get into
No,
fights,
fucker.
as you might do with Cthulhu or, any of these games. But ultimately, there is a part of us as TTRPG players that just kind of does
you,
want to
bitch.
punch the monster. And so you end up in a fight where I suppose it's not unequal in the way that non-combat can be in D&D 5e,
Oh.
but it just means that no one has any balance considerations whatsoever. It's probably the one kid who's got high tough is doing all of the fighting. And they're not necessarily actually that good at it, but they're the only one with high tough.
This brings up a really interesting point, I think, because in a movie, I think in a scene like that, you really would have kind of one kid doing all the fighting. I think that's what kind of like the Witcher RPG is trying to get at, is that in those books, in those games, if a fight breaks out, Yaskar's running for the hills, Geralt is the one drawing the sword and going dicing monsters or brigands up. And in Kids on Bikes, when we're watching Stranger Things, usually it's if something horrible and supernatural happens, Elle pops out her mind powers and splatters the guys, and the other kids go like, wow, you're a Superman. And in a TV show or in a movie, that really works. Having never actually played the Witcher
I have
RPG,
so much
having never
stuff
actually
against
played a game that is
weekends.
that hyper specialized, I'm always a little bit hesitant because it feels like, I don't know, man, are we all just going to be sitting on our thumbs?
It's so interesting that you bring up L, because
I don't
of course
care.
with regards to Kids on Bikes, there is a specifically built-in factor of that game is that there is a shared super-powered character between the whole group. So the characters that you play are all just normal kids, but there's some ET, or there's an L, or there's a Sloth from the Goonies who has some special abilities beyond
the
the
exit?
kids. And they are supposed to be shared in control by all of the players at the table, who each have control of a different aspect of that character. But regularly, I have found in discussions online, in actual play podcasts that I listen to, it either becomes a character that the DM ends up playing as a DM PC because the players kind of don't think to control them. They don't think about that as a character that belongs to them in part. Or I see a lot of folks online have the discussion of, well, we don't want a superpowered character that we share. We want each of us to have some sort of superpower in the mix. And I'm curious to see how that gets handled when Kids with Capes, which I believe they're working towards, which is a superhero sort of version. They have kids on brooms, which is magic, and they're working towards Kids with Capes. And I'm curious to see whether that is a shift that they take the game design in, because it is something that I see time and time again in discussion about this game. And I think it really taps into what you were talking about. It's like, I don't want I want to be the one who has that ability to fight in the TTRPG that I'm playing. Yeah.
I really hope that when Kids on Capes comes out, it will be able
Oh, what
to
the
replicate
fuck?
the feeling
What
I
was
got while I was
that?
watching the Teen Titans show when I was a kid.
Yes, Teen Titans,
Oh, that
X-Men
was
Evolution.
bullshit.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love Teen Titans so much, dude. There was a secret
was
sauce on that
trapper.
show. Maybe it was just because I was of exactly the right age to get pandered to by like Western shows aping anime styles. But That show had such aura.
I need
that
purple
just
dye.
like no other
Oh, yeah.
superhero show has ever
Is this
captured
the other
for me.
Formageddon?
And you know what? I'm telling you, there's something in the
thank
zeitgeist right
God.
now where people are hankering. It comes
Yeah.
around every couple years.
Yeah.
People are hankering for a good superhero TTRPG.
You hear it,
And
folks? We're hankering.
We're hankering. Hankering Fernail. There is a certain, everyone should try their hand. I think every publisher should try their hand at making a superhero game. And they'll all have their strengths and weaknesses, and I don't think anyone has landed one that is 100% like, that's the one yet. But everyone should try it, because one day someone's going to draw that sword out of that stone.
I
We're all
should
gonna
pitch
live.
Hunters a game called
Yes.
Kids with Clues. That's like the Scooby Gang.
I think you should do that.
A mystery machine thing, that would be fun. Anyway. Anyway.
If it weren't for those meddling kids. Oh, dear,
Kids
dear.
with a dog. Yeah.
Kids with a dog. That's the one.
I think, Esmeralda, to answer your question, the moment you try and divvy up the pillars of the game really cleanly between different classes, you start risking players kind of becoming more audience than they are participants, right? It becomes a very turn-based
I need
situation
help.
where turns
Like,
often
no one's
last
business.
the length of a scene. And in D&D, the length of a scene of combat
Oh.
is usually an hour or more. So if you're playing a D&D like
No,
game, I would be
the
worried.
gathering
But
of
if you're
all the
playing a game where
dice.
scenes flow really naturally, and a social scene has about the same weight as a combat scene, I know Daggerheart professes to be that way. I think it's still fairly combat weighted, but I do think it's a little bit more balanced in that regard than, say, D&D is.
Fuck, the other
You might have
Formageddon.
better luck. I don't know. I'd be eager to see. I'd be eager to see the game that does that really, really well. This next question is one that I've actually had on my mind a lot recently, as I've run Daggerheart for people who've never played it before, for people who've only really played D&D, and thus have a sort of expectation of what the role of the game master is, where the game master is the ultimate arbiter of the
Motherfucker, come on.
story. And players, of course, can influence it, but there is this sort of reverence almost for the GM. And so Justin asks, how much
Yes, you
input
bitch.
should players have in what an adventure is like or what happens in the story? How much space should a GM leave for players to have game input? And ultimately, does it depend on the game? I'll answer that last question first. Yes, but we can get into the specifics of why later. So I want to kick this over to you, Dale, because I think you on your YouTube channel in the past have talked at some length, if I'm remembering right, about the way the back and forth of narrative agency goes in these sorts of situations.
I feel like there's a version of that lives in a lot of people's heads, which is a perfectly, reasonable version, which is where you really like heavily invite openly at the table different players, and what do you think this is going to look like, and what direction, what do you think this person says,
This is not gonna be good.
And I have seen that exist. There are DMs who run that way, but I like to think I have quite a bit of player input on my games, but in a slightly different shape. But particularly, to that last point, does it depend on the game? I've had games of Fate in particular. I have run where I open up by asking a lot of questions to my players about the setting they want to play in. We have sat there and created the setting as part of the first session of the game, and then gone on to play within that setting. So I'm sort of finding out at the same time as they are what's going on. Or Kids on Bikes, again, here we go, Kids on Bikes heavy episode, has a great sort of set of opening questions that invites the players to help create the town that these kids are from, and the relationships between them and each other, and other kids at school. I don't know whether I can't remember whether it's baked into Monster Hearts, but I've seen games of Monster Hearts where it's similarly helping to build the world at the beginning. And then as it pertains to like the adventure itself, I am such a big proponent of, I like to establish the setting as a pitch for my players. Hey, does this sound fun to you? And then get their input on what their characters are. And of course, as many people do, start to tailor the adventure to little things that they've chosen. Figure out what is the most exciting to them about their character. And try to have the adventure play into those aspects. But the step that I think is really important to taking that a little bit further is I don't do this at the table because I think it just kind of takes away from everything that's going on. I love asking players, hey, I'm thinking about having this happen with your character. What do you think about that? You know what I mean? Like, it's because I think we can get really precious about like secrets. Or wouldn't this be a cool twist to happen to your character? I think it is often really just as fun to have the player in on it. It's not a twist that's going to happen at them. It's a twist that they are part of, that they're playing to the rest of the table as the audience. And sort of mixing and matching and doing that with different players at different times. Yeah.
I agree with this so much. And it's, this might seem like a tangent, but it's why I think the GM of Daggerheart should be called the director, just like Draw Steel's GM is called the director.
Oh my God.
And I think they're both
so many
cinematically
enemies.
oriented
Oh my
in a
God.
way that
I
ultimately
knew it.
the director of a film set has a sort of creative control, a sort of final say over everything that goes on. But if you know anything about filmmaking, you know that the director, a good director, is in constant collaboration with every other department head, right? A director isn't going to micromanage the props head, the costume head. The director might have ideas. A particularly auteur director might have big ideas. But at the end of the day, it's a task that's way too big for any one person to command an entire film set. Yeah, I think if you as the GM of any game think that you need to have an iron grip on kind of, you know, the authority, the authorship of a world, you will find things slipping through the cracks. Or that's been my experience anyway. And my experience with beginning this game of Daggerheart has been kind of slowly getting my players comfortable with that idea of collaborating.
It is my preferred
not just
weapon.
I bring the world and they bring the characters. Like it's a potluck where I buy the pizza and they bring the salads. No, it's more like we are building all of this together.
Ooh, cool.
And you may be the expert on your character, but that goes so far beyond just the actions that your character takes. It includes all the backstory elements. That's why the start of the game of Daggerheart involves me putting out a big map of the region on the table and people starting to draw locations from their backstory on the map. It's why I don't really come into a game like that with a big overarching plot planned. I'm looking to the backstory questions that they've put on that backside of their character sheet, being like, oh, that's a thread, that's a thread, that's a thread, because it all makes it very character motivated rather than what we might say of D&D, where it's kind of location oriented or event oriented. The characters happen to be here, or they are here looking for treasure, and this is what happens, right? It's not character motivated. It's action oriented, which isn't bad. If we're talking about a game that has a lot of high character involvement, the players have got to be involved on a deeper level than just the action.
Because the best stuff is the stuff that you're both excited about. It's stuff that they're excited about. You go, I also think that's really exciting. So there are going to be threads that you don't pick up on.
I've never had this one before.
And there are going to be threads that they don't pick up on. Just chase the ones that you both like. You know what I mean? It's where so much delight can be found. And it leaves all these extra unanswered things, which makes the world feel big and real and like there's still more room to explore at any given moment. But it just, I don't know, I'm such a believer. I mean, Arpeggio framed it as conspiring. And I think that's exactly it. You are conspirators. Yes. I think that is where so much of the play comes from. And I think that there's so much to be found there. I mean, if you really want to do it at the table, there are other things that I recommend, like I recommend putting an option, like a two-pronged option in front of your player. When you have a druid who is absolutely, they've built their character and they're like, and they are an eco-terrorist. And then you put an option in front of them and they're like, okay, well, are you going to do the eco-terrorism or are you going to actually do this other thing? Often they find that a more interesting and difficult choice than their backstory would sort of make that seem. But yeah, I don't know. A particular example comes to mind of a player who was playing a Warforged in a setting where the concept was that these were just, steam-powered machines, that there's too much magic and it's brought some of them to life. And they're not supposed to be brought to life.
Whoa!
And so you know, he kept sort of chasing that thread and being like, "Ooh, what if?" And we ended up with a whole extra language that was added to the game, because what if they can sort of message each other in binary or via Bluetooth or whatever? Okay, what does that look like? And we chased that thread, and that created, you know, different openings within the story than would have existed otherwise if he wasn't interested in that. Or there was the idea of, okay, well, what happens if there's a magic blackout caused by sorcerers? Look, it's a setting. There's lots of stuff. And okay, if that happens, we talked about if his character dies, because these robots are not meant to be sentient, and then they mostly just go back to sleep at some point. What if when his character dies, it doesn't look like death for other characters? What if he hits 0 and he just keeps acting in combat, but it's only after the other characters start trying to talk to him that they realize he's gone, you know, that sort of a thing. And it's those little threads. Pull on those threads that they're excited about, that you're excited about, and you end up creating not only an incredible sort of world setting with the input of your players, but you end up with brilliant adventure moments or impactful adventure moments.
We're close to time, but I want to slide this one last wrinkle kind of under the door, like Indy grabbing his hat. Fun28 High in chat, welcome, by the way. I haven't seen you before around here. Says, my group loves combat, the role play, not as much. And I want to add that to this conversation, because what we've been talking about so far are like narrative decision makings, sort of collaborative, co-conspiratorial world building and stuff like that with the GM. If we look at games with non-binary resolution systems, like what is it, the Fantasy Flight Genesis system, the Star Wars RPG, or even with Daggerheart with their hope, fear, success, failure sort of quaternary system. What about in a combat situation, right? There's no role playing involved here at all. There's no, you know, I say this to the noble, and so all of these butterfly effect things start happening. What if you just say, hey, you got a success with fear. What does the fear look like? Do you think if we could convince a character, a player that is, who doesn't like all this role play nonsense, but loves a bit of combat, to start grabbing onto narrative agency? Or do you think that's a sort of, offered olive branch that just falls flat every time?
Well, I think it's an interesting example, because I think often that is the gateway into roleplay, right? Because people who don't like roleplay, it's not 100% the case, but often I find people who don't like roleplay don't like it because it feels silly and it feels vulnerable and it feels strange. There's sort of an emotional element to it that they don't want to engage with, right? And so that's why a lot of their sort of interaction with roleplay elements of the game end up being so, you know, class clown, joker, look, I'm making it stupid because it feels stupid. But I think that when you get to those little bit, you know, it's like the 5e, you know, what does your Eldritch Blast look like? The classic question. Okay, you've got Eldritch Blast. What does it look like? Mm-hmm. You know, just those tiny little, just introducing them, just drip feeding the role play into those sort of other aspects of the game that don't feel as vulnerable and don't feel like they have to have an opinion in character or an emotion in character or any of these things. It's just, hey, so this is with fear. What does that look like? I feel like that's a really useful kind of thing to start pushing.
Sword Compass also says that if you've got a combat with a ton of rolls, do you do that every time? Does that start to drag it down a little bit? And my thought is, if you're doing something like this, have a combat that doesn't have 20 rolls, you know? If the difficulty of a combat is often sort of commingled with its length, right? I don't think that most combats in D&D are hard. I think most of them are long. And that's not 100% true, but I think for the most part, difficulty and length are kind of co-equal in tabletop combat, because at the end of the day, the GM has a certain level of fiat to end the combat or prolong it.
Yeah, I also think it's really worth noting that consistency is an illusion. It's a trap. You don't just because you do something one time doesn't mean you have to do it that way every time. Sometimes it's a good thing to remain consistent, but you don't have to remain consistent. You don't have to do that thing just because it is this tool or whatever. Just pick a moment. Do it the first time it happens. Do it the last time it happens. Do it at arbitrary time that it happens. You don't feel like you have to keep doing that just because you did it that one time. Yeah. I also think Josie Joe put it really well. Making decisions about your character versus in character is a really great way.
Absolutely.
Great way of putting that.
Yeah, because you're not just acting when you're role playing, right? It's so much more than that.
Charge weapons and
some kind of a director. Because we are not fully in character throughout the entire game. Even if you're LARPing, you're not fully in character in the entire game. No one does that, and so you were given the benefit that actors lack, which is to be able to just kind of step back out of the eyes, out of the body of your character as much or as little as you want to.
Oh, which, by the way, I love doing as a DM. I love to do that when I'm running a game. When someone asks me a question
so sloppy
about
on this
the world, I love saying out loud, you know what? I don't know. Let's think about this. And then we can run through it together. We can bounce the ideas back and forth. I love when, it's happened multiple times. Someone says, oh, I'm going to loot the body. Is there anything interesting? And I think, you know what? There probably is. But I don't know what it is yet. It feels right that there should be something, but I'm not sure what it is. Let me think about it. I love not knowing the answer and just saying that out loud. And I think that people should say that about their characters too. You get asked a question, you go, you know what, I haven't thought about it. Let me think about it. Yeah.
On that note, I think what I need to think about is ending this podcast. My segues have been, I think, about 2 for 4 on this episode.
I was very impressed. You did a great Ben impression with those segues.
That's what I strive to do. Thanks everyone for this special episode, very special episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the Joey and Dale Spectacular. Can't wait to have you back next week. Until next time, I've been James Hake, coming at you from the hot seat, usually occupied by Ben Byrne. And over there, Dale Kingsmill, where can people find you?
People can find me on YouTube at Monarch's Factory or most other places on the internet at Daily Dale or Dale Daily. Just search Dale Kingsmill, I'll show up.
Yay. All right. Well, I'm going to post that link again. You don't obviously have to rewatch that. I mean, that would be insanity. But if you want to watch any more of the Eldritch Lorecast, there you go. Oh. Okay, so this is one of the, I feel really bad because this is like one of the cheapest trap rooms. So like this trap room makes you go over to here and like you're supposed to go around and like avoid the spikes. I found out that if you go right here, you can jump across to here and then jump to there and get out. And I was like, ooh, I feel kind of bad. Because I feel like I'm skipping it. Yeah, no, it is definitely good to talk about D&D. I mean, I haven't played in a while, you know, just obviously life. Scheduling is just like, feels like impossible anymore. I haven't even been able to play in person with my Saturday group because right now I have my distribution trucks are on Saturdays, so you know I don't have time to play that. Obviously I haven't played any of my online games, be that the motherfucker, yeah, be that Phandalin 5 or New Age. And obviously I was, you know, one of the reasons why the Barren Lands campaign over in the GM Philosophy channel had to go on hiatus. You know, me and a couple other players, our availability just, you know, wasn't there to keep playing, unfortunately. Fuck. What a waste. What the fuck? This item is supposed to stun. Why did that not stun him? Yeah, it does suck that Barrenlands sort of dissolved away. I mean, I know that, like, I hadn't played in, like, the last at least three sessions that they did play. Just because my Tuesday schedule just, I wasn't around. I had other things going on that I had to take care of. So it just sort of sucked because, like, other people's schedules were changing, things just weren't really working out anymore. Do I want lightning? Yes. Something weak. Lightning? I guess a little lightning thing won't be too bad. Yeah, I'm gonna throw it there. What a waste of a revive. You know, but that's the unfortunate thing, you know, right now is, you know, the 3 that I was running is down to, you know, 0 because, you know, like I said, my Sundays, I'm, you know, just, I have so much going on already. My Saturdays with truck, which those should eventually come back in July once things get together. We have planned for our next session, that group and I. So fingers crossed, nothing changes that. And then, yeah, the Barrenlands, that was unfortunate. Defeating a weakened foe. Fortune. Ooh, I could carry Fortune. This is going to let me recover that boom faster, though. You know, I can actually put that there, and it's not going to hurt anything. That is the unfortunate thing right now, so... You know, and honestly, as sad as it is that I have taken, you know, as, like, I don't want to say strong, like, as much as I have taken, like, such a big step away from D&D, you know, like, I'm not playing right now, because I'm not even playing Pathfinder or anything like that. Like, I was playing in a Pathfinder game on Fridays, and that's not happening because the guy who ran that got a job that doesn't afford him to play the night that we were. So that particular one isn't even going on. I'm gonna put this, you know, put that there. So I'm not playing any RPGs at this point. And got the new Dragon Delves book. Overpriced. I want to say I pre-ordered it. I haven't even looked. Honestly, I haven't been on D&D Beyond in a little while. It's, you know, obviously have not had a huge reason to be on there. But I am very curious to see what it is because, obviously the Phandalin 5 campaign, when, you know, when I'm able to get that campaign, you know, scheduled and, you know, get everyone together to play that one, obviously dealing with the Cult of the Dragon, I was really looking forward to the Dragon Delves, you know, campaign or anthology coming out, because that would be a good opportunity to look into, you know, some dragon themed adventures, and, you know, even if they're disjointed, that might work in my favor. Fuck you. I just, you know, I am a little disheartened. You know, I was talking to, you know, Josh from the GM Philosophy channel. Fuck yeah, dude. I'll beat your ass. Bam, 4. You know, Josh and I were talking recently, and you know, I sort of explained to him that you know, like, cause I've been super quiet over in his server. You know, and he reached out to see if I was doing all right. Which I appreciated. It was very kind of him. But you know, obviously I work at Walgreens. You know, those of you who, you know, seen enough of this, you know I work at Walgreens, and with Rite Aid recently closing down, we've been extremely busy. You know, there's a lot going on. We're just busier in general. And, you know, that's, you know, just kind of made work a little bit more hectic. But, you know, with D&D in general, the truth of the matter, like I feel like I've lost the spark, you know, like when like I said about work, you know, when I'd get home, I would, you know, I'd usually, like, you know, pull up some YouTube and like watch some D&D stuff and get really engaged, and, you know, think about ways that I could, you know, introduce that on the weekends, you know, when I was playing. And now I'm just like, you know, I'm just sort of like digging into a game, or I'm, you know, just sitting in YouTube or whatever, or watching a movie, and I'm just like exhausted from the day. And I don't really have that same like ambition to sit there and do D&D stuff. And, you know, that fire that always pulled me back into the game just like isn't there right now, you know. And unfortunately, thinking about it doesn't really get me as excited as it used to. It almost feels like heavy, if you will. Like I'm just sort of going through the motions, or, you know, like it almost feels as if like I'm mourning something that like I can't fully access or grasp anymore. You know, it's like even though, you know, even though like D&D can still be there, you know, I'm obviously still like, you know, like I was gonna be running, you know, my Saturday games for the moment, but like those are on pause. My Sunday games are, you know, on pause, and it you know, like the only time that I'd even have to play D&D is like after work at night, and I'm just so exhausted. And then on top of that, there's everything going on with WotC right now. You know, obviously Crawford, Perkins, and Kenrick, you know, those are massive names that have all left. And, you know, Crawford and Perkins obviously went to Darrington, and who knows what Todd Kenrick's going to do. I hope he gets picked up by somebody. Like, honestly, if he goes to, I was trying to think of it as I was drinking. What's the, what's the Nexus? Demiplane. I hope to God he goes to Demiplane. No, I actually don't hope he goes to Darrington Press. I hope he goes to Demiplane. The reason why I want him to go to Demiplane is because, so Todd Kenrick was originally brought on at D&D Beyond. So D&D Beyond used to be owned by Fandom, and Todd Kenrick was the one who was doing like the reporting, like he was doing like the community updates on the platform and stuff. And then he was when D&D Beyond, or when WotC bought D&D Beyond, Kenrick was brought on as, you know, like this community manager, this guy who was going to update people and stuff. And that's why he always did those interviews with Chris and with Jeremy. And that was, you know, he was hit. Those three were huge faces of the community. And that was why when I went to PAX U the one year and I was getting a bunch of people to sign this scroll I have, and I saw him, like, I went up to him and I'm like, I want you to sign this. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because you're the face of D&D for me. Like, when there's a new update for D&D, it's you know, you're the one sitting there interviewing these guys. And like, if you don't know, Demiplane, which is a website where a bunch of different you can go on. So Demiplane is a website like D&D Beyond. It was actually created by people who worked on D&D Beyond. They made their own website called Demiplane, and they partnered with a bunch of different RPGs. So Pathfinder, Marvel Multiverse, Cyberpunk, Fallout RPG, Vampire the Masquerade, Starfinder, obviously Daggerheart in more recent, Cosmere, Alien, Candela Obscura, Avatar Legends, Hunter the Reckoning. They do have a 5th edition, you know, the free one, and Mutant Year Zero. You can go there and you can buy their books, you can make your characters, and it's basically D&D, but for all of those different ones. I want Kenrick to be picked up by them. And the reason for that is because I think he would do an excellent job of being a big community draw point. And let him do Darrington. You know, let him do Candela Obscura and Daggerheart stuff, because those are both Darrington Press properties. Like, it would be a very similar role he was in. And obviously, Todd Kenrick can make his choices. He can, you know, decide what he wants to do. And if he wants to do something different, if he wants to get out of, you know, that same role that he was in for so long, I totally respect that. But like, I see him excelling at something like that, you know, being that community touch point for those different communities' digital platforms. You know, you're not really gonna find a better digital, you know, marketplace for those other RPGs other than their own platforms. So it's a good opportunity. Obviously, again, I don't know if it's something that he wants to do, but if it is, I would look forward to that. You know, I'd be really excited to see him jump into a role like that, because if he is, you know, if they have like a Demiplane YouTube video, then he could do interviews with people, you know, throughout that. Oh, this sucks. Oh, I should have put that down there. Fuck. All right, I'm gonna put that there. Was this notion mentioned? No, this is just something that I feel like he would be a good fit for. There has been no talks whatsoever. Like this is all just like, you know, in my own head. You know, but it's, you know, in a way it's kind of like, you know, obviously I don't know what Todd Kendrick was doing behind the scenes. I don't follow the man, you know, that closely to know what he was doing at work every day. But, like, the stuff that I saw him doing, it just seems like it would be fitting. You know, kind of like how, you know, Perkins and, you know, Crawford are in the roles they are now. Fuck. Might as well put that there. Although, I could do reduced damage. Yeah, let's do that instead. But, you know, like I said, that, you know, everything that happened in WotC recently, it feels like... it just felt like another nail in the coffin, you know? Like, the version of D&D that I loved is just sort of slipping away, and what's left doesn't really inspire me anymore, you know, or in the same way. Like, even when I watch, like, videos about Daggerheart or other systems, it's interesting, sure, but, like, the thought of actually sitting down and running a game just seems like burdensome, or, you know, it just seems exhausting, you know, almost. And that sucks. Like, that really sucks. All right, I'm gonna put this here. This makes sense there. You know, that's... Oh, shit. Yay. Finally get rid of those. You know, and that sucks. You know, it feels like every time I think about it, it's like, oh my God, like, you know, like I'd have to sit down and I'd have to like prep, and, you know, I'd have to schedule, and I'd have to make sure that, like, you know, when that time comes, that I'm not doing anything else. And, you know, obviously I would never want to blame any of this change on Kiva, you know, but I have to recognize that my responsibilities in life have changed. You know, my focus has changed. And as much as I've tried to, like, you know, hold on to that of, you know, where it's like, hey, you know, I was still running D&D for so long with, you know, with her. It's like, now I just, like, to even fathom dedicating 4 to 5 hours to a game feels impossible. And even if I was available, like, if everybody was available on a Saturday to run my IRL game, it's like, I think about the fact that, like, you know, okay, so if me and that group got together at, say, like, you know, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and we were gonna play till 8 o'clock at night, okay, that is 5 hours during the day that, like, I am not gonna be home to help my wife with Kiva, to not be here in case something, you know, goes on, in case she needs something or just needs a break, you know, like, it's one of those things where like that is now constantly on my mind of like, am I gonna have time to do something? And one of the what the fuck, that always fucks up. Why? And the problem with that is that it makes like trying to engage with the D&D community feel sad almost. Like I it's like I miss being so ingrained into it. I miss being that guy who ran 3 games, that whenever somebody was like, talking about D&D, I'd get that smirk, I'd get that look on my face, and I'd be like, I run 3 games. And it's like, oh, how do you manage it? And it's like, it's not hard. But it is. It is hard. It is difficult. Or like, anybody that I would meet who played D&D at one time, where it's like, oh yeah, I used to play, I don't have the time anymore, family, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I got a family, and I always made the joke. I always made the shittiest joke of, somebody would be like, oh, where do you find the time in the day? Like, how do you find the time to play so much? And I would always jokingly say, oh, I sacrifice my family time. That wasn't a joke. That really was not a joke. Like, before Kiva, there were so many times where, like, I would get home from work, and it's even on a day where I opened, like if I had a day off or something like that, like, other than doing, oh, fucking hell, I didn't even know he was coming out. Other than doing like general housework and stuff like that, like, those would be my only times, like going downstairs and like, being a part of the family and shit. But like now it just, it doesn't feel like I know that I can't do shit like that. I have to be down there to, take care of Kiva. I want to be a part of her, her days. And, I know in time it will get easier for me to engage with the hobby again. I know in time it is something that I will be able to share with her. It's unfortunately not right now, but in time that is something that I can do. Hell, that little girl has a stuffed Cthulhu that she loves more than anything else, and I can't wait till the day that I can, let her play a Call of Cthulhu game, or let her play D&D as a warlock that Cthulhu is her patron, or something like that. It's like, that is something that, like, I have those hopes for once she's older and once she, can understand that stuff. The hard part for me, the mournful part for me, is that I have a legitimate fear that I will lose that spark that loves D&D so much before that time comes. It's because like I have spent the last 10 years ingrained into D&D, spending all my time, with it. And it's just now so not a part of my life that, like, I'm fearful that I'm gonna lose it faster. That it's gonna be, an exponential decline. And that makes, you know, that makes me scared, you know, to like not stay up on it. And that's why I still try and, you know, watch like the Eldritch Lorecast, and, you know, I still try and watch Mastering Dungeons, you know, which is another podcast. So it's, you know, it's one of those things where like I'm still trying to engage with the community, but it just sucks because I miss it so much, because it's just, you know, it almost feels like I'm trying to protect that love rather than like letting that sadness kind of curdle into resentment. You know, like I don't want to, I don't want to sit there and, you know, stare at, you know, like stare at the proverbial picture of D&D when we were happy, you know, and like, you know, like hold on to the past so much that like it makes me sour. You know, and that is sort of the shitty part of it all. So like, I mean, I did. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, I have lost a big part, you know, because I don't have D&D in my life as much as I did. Like, there sort of is that part of me that, like, that was part of who I was. You know, that is still a part of who I am. I mean, hell, for Father's Day, well, for Father's Day, my wife got me a metal Pokemon card, which was really cool, because I do collect Pokemon cards. But, like, for my birthday, Kaylee got me a thing of D&D themed beef jerky, where there's like, is that a dice link? Fuck yeah. 17 at least. You know, where there's like one flavor for each class. I've only eaten like 3 or 4 of them because I keep wanting to let Kaylee have some whenever I'm eating them. Who the fuck is this guy? Jesus Christ. This guy sucks. What the fuck? Why do you have so many attacks? That was awful. Ooh. Wait, roller stars. Those, what is that? No, that's the icosahedron one. That's one where you roll a big d20. But like, you know, like I said, it does feel like it almost does feel like I have lost that part of myself. Like, you know, D&D is a huge part of who I am. It's how people know me. It's, you know, like, so many people in my life know me as the D&D guy. You know, when people at work introduce me to like a new team member, that is oftentimes, you know, what the joke is, where it's like, you know, oh, this is Lucas. He'll tell, you know, it's like he's gonna talk your ear off about D&D, you know, and it's like, it sucks because I don't have that anymore, you know, and I want to talk about it, but like, I'm also not motivated to talk about it. You know, like I said, that spark in me is gone. That fire in me is just not there right now. And I hope, you know, above all, that it is just smoldering, you know, that one day my, you know, my ability to play will align with my, or, you know, my desire to play will align with my capacity and ability to play. What the fuck is that? Oh, that's fortune. Jesus Christ. All right, I guess we're taking this one at this point. You know, and then I'll be able to get back into it, you know, hard and heavy. But it's a good offer. But I don't have any health, and I can't really risk 20. So just a period of transition. Yeah. Like I said, I don't know, you know, and it's that unknown factor. Well, so that's the thing. You're allowed time for hobbies even as a parent. But the thing is that it's the time. The problem is that the time that I used, the time that I dedicated to D&D as my hobby in order to do it to the capacity that I was just so grand that I can't do that now. It's just not feasible. It's not practical. You know, like I said, I used to dedicate so much time to D&D, and I can't do that anymore to that same degree. And I don't know if everyone has like you know, a similar experience, but it's like one of those things where it's like, you know, how do I put it, like, you know, you used I'm gonna put it this way. It's like, okay, if you're used to eating a whole candy bar when you buy a candy bar, it feels sort of lackluster and sad when you're now only given half a candy bar, because it's not as fulfilling, you know, or it's not as filling, you know. It's like, if you're used to getting a candy bar, but now you can only get half a candy bar. I know it's a terrible, you know, a terrible comparison, but like, that's, you know, it feels like you're not getting out of it what you want. Oh. Seen a big role. I mean, I don't. Oh fuck! I didn't want to fight him. This is gonna suck. Yep. Yep. I knew that was gonna happen. I mean, I am involved in my niece and nephew's life. I wouldn't necessarily say that I have a bigger role than, you know, any other relative, you know, necessarily. I mean, they do come over and they do spend, you know, weekends and stuff here and stuff like that. But, you know, like, yeah, I mean, family in general just is a lot of time occupied.
Dismissed.
Critical. Charge weapons. You know what? No, I'm putting that there. I fear the Formageddon is going to be up there. I have enough to get some health, though. Yeah. No, I didn't mean to buy that. Fuck. Oh, whatever.
I'm healing.
Damn it. That wasn't what I wanted to buy. I didn't want to buy the die. I wanted to buy the health max upgrade. Oh, that's stupid. I mean, I guess I got conjuration bonus, which is going to help my clouds damage. Okay, alright. Well, at least we got it there. Damn, that was dumb. Oh, thank God. Please tell me I can get some... Oh, that's some money. Which is good. 4. Fuck. Come on, I need a 1. Oh, thank God.
That's refreshing.
2. Damn it.
Thank you for playing, Nice Wielder.
Alright, this is probably the Formageddon.
Incoming.
Oh no, he'll be next.
I can do this all day.
Damn it, these fucking bombs. I hate this stage so much. I mean, I get that this prepares you for, like, the next one. Coins. I want coins? No, I kind of want green. Yay, green dye. Ugh. Experience. Yeah, it's...
My name is
Yeah, I know your name, you stupid son of a bitch. Your name is Bitch. Oh my God.
Done yet.
Oh my God.
You should stick to making pawns.
What do we got? No. Money. Let's stay even in D&D shift. See, that's the thing. That's what I don't necessarily know. You know, it's like... Well, sorry. Like...
Traps and more traps.
You know,
actually.
I used to... When I was at work, I used to sit there and, like, come up with story ideas. All the time. You know, I would come up with, like, character concepts and, like, you know, fun ideas. I just don't do that anymore. It's, like I said, it feels like... It feels like I've lost... You know, a major spark of who I am.
Formageddon.
And it sucks. You know, it feels like it feels like I've just lost, you know, a lot of energy to do the things that I enjoyed and loved. You know, and even trying to like truncate it.
I understood full and well what that.
You know, even trying to like,
Coins.
you know, still hold on to it to some degree by supplementing it with whatever the fuck those things were, my Tales of Elsewhere, you know, where I was coming up with these, you know, like stories of, you know, these vignettes into other, you know, into realms beyond. You know, that was like such a fun idea, and I enjoyed, you know, the two that I, you know, wrote and recorded and, you know, took time to do. And then I had wrote, sorry, that was a weird way of saying that. I've written two others. I even recited one on screen the one day during a stream. Motherfucker, I keep forgetting about, like, all these enemies blow up. You know, like, I had the one about, like, you know, what would the experience be if somebody was, like, the victim of a ritual where their body was taken over by, you know, another entity, you know, where they felt trapped inside of themselves. And it's like, you know, that experience. And then there was another one of, that I wrote, of this, like, I had this, like, vision of somebody telling this tale about this statue out in the middle of a forest. It was like this man that was like standing there or like sitting there in the forest. It was like this huge statue, and like people from this town or village would go out, and like the statue like dripped a tear out of its eye, and you would collect it, and it would be used in like medicines and rituals and stuff like that. And it's like this was sort of the tale of the last time that this stuff was collected, because, you know, after this experience, or after this one time, like the statue was gone, like it moved. And I wrote that, and I just have not had the motivation, unfortunately, to like fully write out like the full dialogue. Like I wrote it, but I haven't written it in a way that it sounds, you know, spoken. You know, putting it in a point of view, if you will. And so, you know, like I have that, but like I said, I don't feel that motivation anymore. I just don't. You know, I haven't made a D&D character in how long? That sucks. You know?
Finders keepers.
Yeah, you know, it's just such a, unfortunately, such a lack of energy in just doing the things that I loved. And I'm not gonna lie, like, I was even feeling that sort of recently with some video games. Like, I'm not gonna lie, until this, you know, whatever the fuck this game is called, I can't remember. Lost in Random, yeah. Until Lost in Random came into my life, I was like really scrounging, you know, to find a game that was gonna, you know, entertain me and like engage me and feel fun to play. And obviously I play games on the first 15, and there's some games on there that I do play a lot. But, like, there's a lot of times where, like, I just don't feel up for playing some of those games. Luckily, this game sort of came in right at that, you know, good time and is allowing me to fill that gap. Motherfucker. Bitch, fuck.
The stories that you always talk in stories. Like, yeah.
Well.
The cheapest around here.
Oh boy. I need health. And I want this. And I want that.
Pain lessons.
Okay. Okay.
Easy come, easy go. Filthy foes.
I'm not actually going to have a lot of rooms left where I'm going to be fighting enemies. The last time I played on this one where I actually got to the final boss, which was arguably the first time that I actually got to hear. Fucker. I realized there wasn't a ton of rooms. Unlike the, you know, first handful of biomes. Where's the other enemy? Oh, there it is. Fuck you,
That all you
bitch.
got, meh?
Alright. I don't have anything. This is not gonna serve any purpose whatsoever. I'm probably not gonna get enough dies to actually give me some. Oh, what is this? Is this Ima, Uma, and
As time
Amma?
passed, and Natalia did not heal, when the three heads.
Yeah, I think that's Ima, Uma, and Emma. Or Ima, Uma, and Amma. And then there's the Visionary. They used to be like 4 heads or something like that. One? Hell yeah. Thank you. 2 gold. Good. 3. Oh shit. That means nothing. 2 is nothing. 4 is also nothing. But this is gold. This is gold. Alright, I'm not going to complain about that. I'm now up to max health. Fingers crossed I cannot be an idiot and hold on to a good chunk of it before I get to the final boss. Ah! No. My right eye is, I'm so tired, my right eye is like getting hazy and stuff. Ooh, that's actually a pretty good one. I don't have anything that I'd necessarily want to replace it with, though. I mean, I could actually get rid of that. That's not the worst. Losing health reduces damage taken by... No. Fuck it. It's not a bad upgrade, but I don't necessarily know. Okay, so here's the exit. I obviously don't want to go there yet. Oh, fuck. That's actually a really good card. Oh, shit. That's a really good card. Yeah, actually, that is a really good card. The innovation has to be created by experience, actual science, active doing. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I don't have the motivation to create motivation. Oh. Do I want to risk it for the biscuit? Can I get a red? Oh, thank God. At least it wasn't a waste. I was kind of iffy on if I wanted to burn that health. I know I can go back to the merchant and get a die. This isn't going to do anything for me, but I might as well just throw it on there. Not like I can spend my gold in the exit anyway. So now I'm going to go fight the knight. Oh, wait. Huh, I just realized the name. The final boss's name is Mare, M-A-R-E, and he's a knight. So he's the Nightmare. Mare the Knight.
I was lost.
Alright, I'm not gonna beat him. So, you know, good runs, but... Yeah, now he has a shield. So what the fuck is he gonna do? I've never gotten to this stage of him. Oh shit, those are collapsing, okay. Yep, big AoE. Yep, fuck off. Oh shit, enemies! Ads! He has ads! He does ads? Holy shit! No, that sucked. Man, oh man. I knew I was gonna die, but that was a hell of a fight. I will say, I do like that card that I had, which was like the big AoE that had the chance to stun. Like, I kind of like the ones where you can do a little bit further out, like bigger range damage, but that one wasn't bad. All right, am I gonna be able to talk to somebody? Oh wait, I can do the Sixers stuff. Oh, I kind of like that.
By the loom, exquisite.
Hey,
Bestie!
yes, I'm best.
Oh, Bestie, you don't remember? I've been lost in it. No, don't be. I'm so relieved you're back. I've been
What do I get? Oh, some pip dust. Oh, a shred of hope. Cool. Oh yeah, no, Fortune also has his own costumes. What was the other one? It was the... Do I have the whole thing for this? I should, yeah. Who can I talk to? Who is it that I'm supposed to talk to? Oh, it's her.
Ah, savior of the...
Are you saying that all this time
utterly miserable.
still don't?
Of course you don't. Haircut.
I
Your weapon can be your heart and your intent.
Yay, pipped a shred of hope. Alright. Let's... I really like the lurker mask. I think it's cool as shit. Alright, but, you know, I like the red eyes that go with it. But I actually really like... I really like this. I like the red eyes on him. That looks cool. I like the red pips. All right, let's upgrade this a little more. I kind of want to do this one. Spectre Lance.
If you can put them, you can have them.
I wouldn't mind giving that a shot.
Blessings upon you, Dice Wielder.
Sweet, now I can save up for those.
Don't keep me waiting.
Can't do anything over here yet. Shit, what was those other ones? Restore Shred of Hope and other. Okay, so I still need one more Diceling. Find out the power. Yeah, so that won't come until the very end of the game. And everyone else is sealed except for where I'm going towards the end. Okay. Yeah, I think this is going to be about it. Yeah, that's okay, cool. All right, well, not much else I can do tonight. I'm not doing another run, so... thanks everybody who joined me tonight. I know this was kind of a random impromptu stream. If you're into something like this, let me know over in the Discord. Cause like I said, I listen to podcasts often when I'm sitting playing games at night, or like if I watch a movie, but I know I can't stream movies. That's like that's a big no-no. So, you know, but like, as far as I know, there's no like rule against me not streaming podcasts. Again, I don't know. I just don't know. So, you know, fingers crossed there's not an issue with it. I don't think the audio would be copywritten, but I could be wrong. I could be very wrong, and I could get a DMCA, or I could get a you know, cease and desist from Ghostfire, I guess. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, yeah, thanks, everybody, for joining me. Enjoy your night. I'll see you guys. Well, I guess I'll see you guys today, because right now it is Thursday, which means that today is going to be the first 15. So, you know what? I guess we can do that and do that. So, yeah, join me later today as, you know, be playing these 3 games later today. I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, pirates, cowboys, and ninjas, fuck yeah. So all right, bye everybody.